Whether you're looking for answers to specific life questions or simply hoping to become the best version of you possible, welcome to the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast, where we offer insight, information, and strategies based upon research and years of practice as psychologists. So sit back, have a listen, and get connected with our hosts, Dr. Berney Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. Welcome back. Richard, all week long, we have been talking about our new book that will be out and published on iTunes, or not iTunes, in Amazon on January 31st.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited.
It's Handbook for Raising an Emotionally Healthy Child, Part 2, Attention. Mm-hmm. But today we're going to spend some time talking about somewhat of a recurring theme that we had throughout the Part 2 of the book, and that is the idea of progressing from attachment parenting in infancy and early childhood to detachment parenting in adolescence.
That's right, because when I do talks to parent groups, I always begin by saying, where do you want your child to be when he or she walks off the stage at high school graduation? Right. What abilities do you want them to have? What kind of person do you want them to be? What do you want them to be able to do? And most parents want their child, I won't say most parents, children should be fairly independent by then, because they're either going to go to work somewhere or they're going to go to school. Mm-hmm. They're going to leave the home. They're going to leave the structure of their family home, and they're going to strike out on their own. Right. So they should have the ability to do this with far less parental involvement. Right. And so we have this progression, as the title implies it. We have this progression from being attached to our infant with a strong bond and a strong attachment, to being detached from our adolescent so that our adolescent can function independently of us. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So early in life, we want our kids to, not that we want. Early in life, our kids are dependent on us.
They are dependent. They're totally dependent when they're infants.
Right. They can't feed themselves. They can't, clean themselves. They can't do anything. So we have to be very attached to them. And, from the perspective of healthy emotional development, kids have to be attached. I mean, we have this whole category of developmental conditions or developmental problems referred to as reactive attachment disorder. And that's a circumstance where infants don't develop an attachment.
It's so, and we mentioned this in the book, you're right, it's so critical with young children, because you can get failure to thrive, non-organic failure to thrive. If an infant has the sense that nobody's caring for her, they can actually develop a medical condition called non-organic failure to thrive and actually die. Okay. After that, in the early childhood years, you get something called reactive attachment disorder, where kids are unable to self-regulate. They don't feel like anybody cares about them. Right. They become angry. They become irritable. Very difficult to manage behaviorally. Okay. Absolutely. So you're right. There are dire consequences if you're not attaching sufficiently in infancy and early childhood. Serious problems.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so as kids age, though, we want them to become more and more independent. We want them to be able to take and assume their own responsibilities at school, at home, in the community, for their social life, for their academic life, for their for every area of their life. And so it's a relatively slow progression that happens, but it's not a smooth curve, because what you'll see is it's a smooth curve, and then all of a sudden it's a jump. Right. And then it's a smooth curve, and then it's a jump. Yeah, it's
more stepwise than linear. Right.
Right. And then, but once the teen or once the child receives that boost of hormones and the new neuronal connections and everything that happen during puberty, that's when you get that another massive jump in that need for independence.
Yeah, and just to continue that idea of, from infancy you need bonding, early childhood you need attachment. By age 8, we talked about this during the week. By age 8, children should be able to self-regulate. They should
Right.
be able to regulate their own emotions. But there's one more thing that they should be able to do by age 8. You should notice that they're starting to take care of their own materials and their own schedules.
Right.
If they're not, you need to start to attend to that. You need to begin attending to that, because by age 8 or 9, children should be able to keep track of their own materials, their own clothes, their own materials, because you shouldn't, and you may not be able to do that for them.
Right.
If they have a homework assignment, for example, they should know what their homework is, and they should be able to do it fairly independently. And if they're not, then you're going to need to address that issue. But from that point on, from age 8 or 9 on, there should be this gradual transition from being closely attached and supportive to beginning to detach, so that by their 18, you're not disconnected, but they're doing most everything for themselves.
Right. Yeah. I remember when my stepdaughter first went off to college, and the goal was for her to live on campus and to be independent and everything. And I remember that she had roommates who didn't know how to wash their clothes and didn't know how to organize their time and didn't know how to manage their money, and the inability to manage those things for oneself creates so many issues and so many problems with that transition from adolescence to adulthood.
Right.
You have to be able to do that, and that comes through detachment parenting.
Right, and you think of the fear that a teenager must feel as they're thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm going to be leaving home in a year, and they have no skills, they have no abilities, they don't know how to handle money, they don't know how to handle, they, as you say, can't do their own laundry, can't cook themselves a meal, don't know where to get things. That must be a terrifying experience, and one of the reasons why they may not want to leave home.
Right.
They may want to stay. We talked about staying in the comfort of your own home for a while.
Right.
And they may not want to leave only because they don't have the confidence to do it on their own.
Right.
So.
And there's a lot of reasons why we experience some of these issues, some of the issues with detachment and with kids sometimes not having those skills that we want them to have. I think one thing, and you'll be happy to hear me say this, I think one of the things that contribute to this is technology.
Yes.
When I remember very distinctly when I was growing up, I would be, 8 or 9 years old. There was just outside of our neighborhood, there was a little convenience store. And there were times when my mom would be preparing dinner or something, and she would ask me to jump on my bike and ride up to the store to get a loaf of bread or some milk or something like that. Well, at that time, and this was in the 80s, I would ride up there, and if I got there and they didn't have the brand of bread that we usually get, or they didn't, if I didn't, remember what, type of milk to get or something like that, I had a decision to make.
That's right.
I either had to go back home, which was going to have its own set of consequences because Mom would be very upset that I didn't return home with the stuff. Or I had to make a decision that was the best decision that I could make. I had to problem solve a little bit.
Given the skills you had as a 9-year-old,
right?
You had to solve the problem.
Today, we have teenagers, 14, 15, sometimes even driving age, 16, 17, who go to the store to get, something for their parents. And if they don't have exactly what they're there to look for, all they do is jump on their phone and call mom or call dad or text them or something and say, hey, they don't have, this kind of bread. What do you want me to get? So there is this lack of a need for, I'm not sure how else to say it. There just isn't a need to develop those kinds of problem solving skills anymore.
Right. One of my daughters just graduated from college, and she tells her younger sister, college is a time for you to learn how to become independent. You should be able to do all this stuff on your own. You shouldn't be calling home to figure out how to do it.
Right.
And she's right, and she will always say that. The college experience finishes that move to independence. That my daughter now at 22 is completely independent, completely self-sufficient.
Right.
She'll call us for advice,
Right.
but she doesn't need it. She doesn't need the advice, and she knows where to get other advice. Okay, so at 22, she's completely independent, and that's how it should work.
Right.
She can take care of herself completely.
Right. And for those who don't go to college, it's the same thing with entering the workforce.
That's
you know,
right.
if you are, if you've decided, or if your teen decides that they don't want to go to college, that's fine. Remember, only about 40% of the population don't go to college.
Right.
So
And of the 60 who go, many don't finish.
Right. So that there's nothing wrong with that. It's
Right.
fine if that's the path you want to follow, but that brings the other obligations of securing employment and being able to manage money and to be able to make decisions as it relates to all of those things.
Being able to get yourself out of bed in the morning and get to work on time. I mean,
Absolutely.
if your parents have gotten you to school, high school every day of your life, where do you learn those skills?
Right.
And so just getting to work on time,
Right.
Not taking sick days, packing a lunch, all those things should have been settled by age 18.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what you do after high school graduation. You should be able to do it yourself.
Right. Yeah, you should be able to.
I'll bet there are parents get their kids' college schedule and call them to make sure that they get up
I'm sure.
for class
I'm sure.
each morning.
I'm sure they do. And again, we recognize, and I think that this is where there's a challenge for some people, because if you're listening to this and you have a teenager already,
Right.
or you have a new college student, where you're doing some of these things, you're in this catch-22, because if you didn't teach them the skill already, so
That's
now
right.
they don't have it, what do you do? How do you handle that? Because now, if you don't do it, they're not going to get up and they're going to have problems.
Right.
But if you keep doing it, then it's going to continue to foster their inability to do it.
Prevents them from learning how to do it.
Right.
Okay. And
So
I
how do you
think
balance that?
You mentioned sometime during the week, that we have to give our children some opportunities to learn how to handle failure.
Right.
And the younger they do that,
Right.
the better.
Right.
If your kids can learn how to handle failure by age 5,
Yeah.
you have done a fabulous job.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they learn how to handle it by age 8, you've done a fabulous job. If
Yeah.
they've learned how to do it by age 12, you've done a fabulous job. If they still can't handle disappointment and failure by the time they're 16 or 17 or 18, the best time to fail is when you're young.
Right. The consequences are less.
No consequences.
Yeah.
Fail a course in middle school. Parents say, well, I can't let her fail a course in middle
Right.
school. It's the absolute best time to fail a course.
Getting an F on a middle school report card.
As long as it's not a high school course.
Right.
Right?
Means nothing.
Nobody's ever going to know.
Right. Because you get an F on a report card, and you will hopefully elicit some drive, some motivation that, what we did last term didn't work out. So let's try a new plan. And you can work and use that as a way to teach your kid how to study better, how important it is to do homework and those kinds of things.
If you're not, it happens all the time. Kids are in middle school, they're not doing their work, and they're getting low grades. And the parents then fill in the gap. They shore it all up. And the parents then ensure success.
Right.
Okay. The child hasn't learned how to do it.
Right.
Okay. And it's not the child's achievement.
Right.
And that's also deceptive.
Right.
And I wouldn't do that to kids. They have to have their own achievement, their own accomplishments. They have to be theirs. It doesn't matter that they're failing at 6th and 7th grade. If they fail in high school, it starts to matter.
Right.
Because now it's going to affect their grade point
Yeah.
average. If they fail in college, it matters even more because now that grade stays on their transcript forever.
Right.
Okay. High school, it affects your grade point average. but it doesn't really matter in any other important way.
Right.
College stays with you for the rest of your life.
Right.
So the older they get, but you're right. You have put yourself in a catch-22.
Right.
Because if you've never taught your children how to take care of this, you're going to have to keep doing it because now the consequences are too significant.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It's catch-22.
Yeah. So we get that, and so you're going to have to wean yourself a little bit more gradually.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Because it's you can't just stop. And we
That's right.
and again we completely understand that and appreciate that. So what that means is you have to slowly pull away. You have to
choose.
Get them to if it's waking them up in the morning in time for class, it's making sure that they have an alarm clock and make sure that alarm clock is set. And if that alarm clock is set for 7 o'clock, make sure that your phone call comes at 7:05 so that they have the opportunity to wake up with their 7 o'clock alarm before you call. And so you're slowly weaning yourself off that way. But
have them do their laundry at school.
Right.
Okay. There's plenty of ways that they can learn how to do that.
So it may begin, using that as an example, it may begin where they're still coming home for their laundry, but they're doing their laundry at your place.
Right.
And then at some point,
they're doing it.
But they're doing it
themselves. Right.
And so what will happen is bringing all their laundry home to do, if they're still doing it themselves, will just become a hassle.
Right.
And so then they'll find a way to do it at school.
Do it at school.
Yeah.
Right. So choose those areas where the consequences are not quite so grave.
Right.
Like laundry, like getting up in the morning, like handling your and handling your problems with other people and with your professors.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
They need to learn how to do that themselves.
Right.
You can't keep intervening
Right.
by the time they're in college. So you have to, and again, we emphasize this. You don't want to be fighting your children's battles with their professors when they're in college.
Right.
You have to teach them that before they get to college, which means they have to learn how to handle their own problems with their high school teachers or their middle school teachers or their elementary school teachers.
Right.
And once again, the sooner they learn to do that, the better.
Yeah.
They have to learn how to handle their own disappointments, their own differences, their own struggles with their teachers.
Right. Yeah.
Which leads us... Okay.
Yeah, because not learning that is...
It's such a disservice.
Right.
To them.
Yeah. Now, what happens when kids don't learn these things? That's where we get the issue of, this is one of the ways in which we get to the issue of failure to launch.
Failure to launch, right.
If they can't manage their own responsibilities, their own needs, their own obligations, they're going to return to a setting where those needs and obligations are met by someone else.
That means...
That's home.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to come back and they're going to want to live or stay with you.
Right.
That's just one way. That's sort of I wouldn't say the pathological way that it returns that we have the issue of failure to launch, but it is a sort of a developmental way in which we result in failure to launch. There are some other ways in which we get to that point that are less a parent's fault or actually even the kid's fault, but that's something that's completely preventable.
That's right. They must be given the opportunity to learn how to manage their own life.
Right.
Taking care of their possessions, keeping track of their possessions, handling disappointment, handling failure, handling interpersonal squabbles, handling disagreements with teachers and other adults. They have to be put in a position in elementary, middle, and high school where they learn how to do all this. Because your obligation as a parent is to have them independent and able to do all of this on their own by the time they graduate from high school.
Right. So this manifests in two extreme ways. We have the parent who continues to be overinvolved, and the child has not learned how to handle any of these things on his or her own.
Right.
And then you have the other end where the parent and child are completely disconnected, and the parent is basically doing nothing at all to help or support the child. And we So let's talk a little bit about those two examples. Let's start with the neglect.
The neglected child.
Right. We were talking before we started recording today, the fact that there are, we'll just say thousands of high school students just in our school district. So here in Florida, school districts are by county.
Right.
In our single county of 500,000 or so people.
Right. Mm-hmm. We have about 90,000, almost 100,000 K-12 students in our county.
So there are thousands of high school students who are homeless.
We're homeless, right.
Of those, many don't even stay with their parents.
That's right.
They are living on their own and homeless.
As high school students and homeless.
Right.
Okay.
So this is an extreme version of neglect, but these are parents. These are situations where the parents have basically said, "You're out."
Yeah, for whatever reason.
Right.
You know, that we don't know the reasons, but we know that there are at least high school students, and there may be middle school students.
Yeah, we're not sure.
But there are high school students who are functioning on their own, with zero parental support, or involvement.
Right. Now, what? And of course, of those youth, we have a relatively broad spectrum as well. Within that sort of distinct population, we have those who are managing things very, very well. They're surprisingly, amazingly well. They are still getting to school every day. They're still somehow participating in activities that they really enjoy.
Some of these kids are participating in extracurricular activities.
Right.
Homeless children with no parental support are somehow able to manage school, transportation, and extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
Absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah. And it's amazing, and it's I don't know the positive word that I want to use, because I think it's wonderful that these kids have that type of resilience. They can handle those obligations without any parental guidance at all. And
it makes you wonder, are they outliers, or are all children capable of doing this?
I think that they're, in my mind, they have to be outliers, because you think of, you think of, well, I don't know. Because I think it's maybe it's just the upper end of the spectrum.
But it also, they could be outliers. But it makes you wonder, too, if we are perhaps providing our teenagers with too much support.
Right.
And there was an article that came out a couple of weeks ago from Germany, and other countries are saying to us that you're really providing too much support to your teenagers. Yeah. They're capable of doing much more than you're giving them credit for.
Yeah.
But I always have had the feeling that parental over-involvement is done more out of fear than for any other reason. That our children are somehow...
Need.
Right, they're not of need. You don't need to do this. You're doing it because it gives your children an advantage, or it prevents failure, or it prevents underachievement, or somehow it prevents underinvolvement. You know, if I'm involved with my child, they're more likely to do sports or activities, or to do well in school. So I think it's mainly driven by fear.
Right.
That's the feeling that I get. But when I hear this, and I heard a story recently about a student who was fully involved in the life of the school, only to learn later that she's homeless. And she has none of us understand how she's able to do this.
Somehow she finds food, and she finds shelter, and she finds transportation to participate in extracurricular activities and keep up with her grades and manage all of these things. Those are wonderful stories.
Or Michael Orr.
Wonderfully sad stories.
Right. Michael Orr, The Blind Side. He was another one. There's a wonderful story about Michael Orr, who sort of took care of himself until the family took him in. He was going to the laundromat and sleeping here and sleeping there. What do you say, heartwarming or terrifying at the same time?
That's what I was saying. I don't know what the word. I don't know how to describe it.
But here are these, and we think of Michael Orr's story, which had a happy ending. But here we are, right here in our home, right here in our small town,
Right.
where children are doing what Michael Lord did.
Right. Yeah.
Mind-boggling.
It is. Now, of course, the other end of that spectrum is kids who are neglected in that way, and they fall short, and they can't succeed. They can't.
Right.
They just don't have the skills or the resilience or the ability to manage those things, and then those kids have a slew of issues and problems, and they drop out of school, and then and oftentimes that leads to criminality and all kinds of other things, all rooted in the fact that they are not taken care of, and they haven't been taught or learned the skills that they need to be self-sufficient. Right. So you have that on the sort of neglected end of the spectrum.
So that's one end of the spectrum.
Right. On the other end of the broader spectrum, you have those kids whose parents continue to be so over-involved that it creates a whole other set of problems and issues. And
that's
so
right.
You have, and I've talked before on the podcast about, being, we teach at the college and graduate level, and I've had situations where, parents of graduate students are calling me about their kids' grades. And I say kid, but they're adult,
They're
mid-20s.
They're adults.
Kid is they're writing me about their kids' grades.
Yeah, we talk about helicopter parents,
right?
Okay, and everybody knows the concept of or the tiger mom,
right?
Okay, which is an extreme example of an overly involved parent.
Mm-hmm.
Helicopter parents, again, extreme examples of parents who are overly involved. We have got to disengage from our children.
Right.
We are doing too much. We are too supportive. We are denying them. Our over-involvement denies them the opportunity to become competent.
Absolutely.
I don't care what grades they get. I don't care how good they are in athletics. You cannot deny your children the opportunity to become competent, and that's what you're doing.
Right.
There's no advantage and it has to begin early. We said during a week, by third grade, children should they should really be able to manage their own stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, if they can't do that by age 8 or 9, when are they going to do it?
Right.
You're going to wait till middle school? You're going to wait till high school?
Right.
They have to learn how to handle themselves and their lives and their responsibilities while they're in elementary school.
Right. We talked about an example of this in a previous podcast where we shared the story of a dad who's I think it was high school student came to him.
Yeah, his daughter.
His daughter came to him and said, coach isn't playing me. I'm not making it. I'm not
getting
a starter.
Enough playing time. I'm not a team. I'm not. Yeah.
And Dad's simple response was, work harder.
Work harder, and that was the end of the conversation.
And that was right.
Exactly the right thing to do.
Right, and so that's teaching the kid that they have to gain some responsibility for those aspects of their life.
What that dad was saying to her is that this is your responsibility. Right. He didn't have to say that.
Right.
He didn't have to give her a lecture.
Right.
But he got very, very clearly, he put it back directly on her, which is where it should have been.
Right.
What's the worst thing that he could have done?
Called the coach.
Offered to intervene.
Right.
Right? That's the absolute where I know that dad's heart was breaking.
Right.
Don't tell me it was. I know this guy was in pain.
Right.
Okay, for his daughter. But he couldn't let that overwhelm his judgment to say, honey, this is yours.
Right.
Okay? And the worst thing he could have done was to have intervened.
Yeah.
Right.
Conversely, we have, again, we could be at the high school or the collegiate level where students are making decisions where they're not performing as well as they think they should or they want to be or whatever, and they complain to their parents, and then the parents are calling the coaches and saying, creating such a set of turmoil for the school and for the coach and for the athletic program itself, because their kid's not, well, if we use that terminology, where their kid's not working as hard as they should be working.
Right.
And so instead of allowing the kid to take that responsibility and work harder, the parent is taking over and, using strategies that adults would use, like, talk about legal action, talk about fairness, talk about bullying, talk about, prejudice.
My daughters in particular, I don't think it happened with my son, but my daughters in particular were involved in high school activities. And invariably, and it was difficult because you have practices and you have uniforms and you have schedules and you have all these things that everybody's trying, the coach and the kids and the parents, everybody's trying to manage all of these activities, okay? And then you have a child who decides to complain to his or her parents. And then the parents insert themselves into the process. And you're right. It quickly goes from, it's not even a question, it's an accusation that now this entire team has to put everything on hold to deal with this complaint, because now it's a legal, or at least due process complaint. If it doesn't get to the attorneys, it becomes a due process complaint. And now everybody's energy, the coach gets interviewed, the players get interviewed, it creates confusion, it creates animosity, it creates questions, accusations, and the entire team gets thrown into turmoil.
Yeah.
Because a parent now wants to take action. Okay. When what should happen is that this teenager should be told, sweetheart, honey, this is voluntary.
Right.
If you don't want to participate, nobody's making you participate. This isn't your math class that you have to take.
Right.
This is an activity that you volunteer for. At such times, you have to work hard to make it.
Right.
And if you're not making it, then you have to do whatever you need to do to start making it.
Right.
Whether you're not getting along with the coach or you don't think the coach. I can remember going to my dad and complaining about a coach, and he said to me, "We're not having those discussions.
Right.
That's it. That was the end of it.
Yeah.
Don't bring that to me." He said, and he did exactly the right thing.
I tell my son, you should talk to him about it.
Right.
If you're having a hard time, talk to him about it.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's a matter of just allowing them to take the responsibility of handling those things.
And it's such a perfect opportunity. I mean, because it's no risk.
It's so empowering.
When you talk about an athletic team or an extracurricular activity, there's absolutely nothing to lose by a child dealing with that, him or herself.
Right.
If it's a physics class, if it's an English class,
it's a little bit different.
It's a little bit different. But when you talk about a voluntary activity, what a perfect way for kids to learn how to deal with problems on their own.
Right.
It's the absolute ideal circumstance. And for a parent to inject him or herself into that is to deny your child a fabulous learning opportunity.
Right.
Fabulous because it's no risk.
Right.
It's a no-risk learning opportunity.
Right.
You don't get that many.
Yeah, think about what you're doing to your kid if again, high school or college level, and they get on the team because you did something to get them on the team.
Yeah,
what is going to happen to them socially as it relates to the other players? The only reason that your child got on the team was because the parent, pulled some punches or something and made it happen.
And we know it because it was made public.
Right.
I mean, the kids the other players had to be questioned.
Right.
They had to be grilled by authority figures, by administrators, maybe by attorneys.
Those things don't stay hidden.
Everybody knows why you're on the team.
Right.
So, what has that done to? What has that done to the child's self-esteem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have to have that detachment to put the kids in charge of handling those aspects of their life.
That's right.
And that's all about the detachment parenting.
That's detachment parenting, is that you have to stop supporting. I think it's heartbreaking when I hear, we're doing his college applications, we have everything spread out on the table, and I'm refining his college essay, and I'm helping this and I'm helping that. It shouldn't require that much parental involvement.
Right.
Something's wrong when parents have to provide that amount of support. something's wrong somewhere.
Absolutely. So,
but you're
All
right. We create these catch-22s. We understand. We're parents.
yeah.
I know the feeling. I know what it means to want to help your children and to give them that little extra advantage.
Right.
But remember what you're taking away from them.
Right.
You know, if it's not their accomplishment,
Right.
if they go to bed at night thinking, this is my mother's victory, this
Right.
is my dad's victory, if it's not theirs, how are they ever going to develop self-esteem,
Right.
self-confidence, that self-assured quality that we want all of our children to have?
Absolutely.
So
It's difficult to do. All right. Is that it?
I could talk about this for a long
I
time,
know.
but I won't. I'll stop.
Yeah.
But boy,
Yeah.
love to have your thoughts on this one.
And we talk about it more in the book. And speaking of the book, part 2 of Handbook for Raising an Emotionally Healthy Child is ready to go. It will be released on Amazon at Amazon.com on January 31st.
Right.
Until that time, until January 31st, if you write a review of this podcast, or not this specific podcast, but the
Right.
podcast in general, on iTunes, we will send you a free EPUB version of part 2 of the Handbook for Raising an Emotionally
You said
Healthy
you were
Child.
going to send me one, right?
Yeah,
I don't have to write a review.
We'll see.
Okay.
All you have to do is click on the link in the show notes, and it will take you right to iTunes so that you can write a review. Now, the only additional step is that you then have to
Right.
write to me and let me know that you did that. You know, just because there's no way in iTunes for me to contact you.
We've been talking about that all week, and you know these funny things about electronics, where when you write to us, we have no way of responding to you,
Right.
Because we don't know your email.
In iTunes, right?
The companies don't give us your email,
Right.
which is probably a good thing.
Right.
Protects your privacy, but we have no way of contacting you.
Right.
We love hearing from you, but we can't even thank you for
Right.
writing to us.
Right.
So this is a case where we do want to respond.
Yeah.
Because we want to send you this book.
Right.
Via email.
Email, right.
And so, but we have to know where to send it.
Right. So write your review and then send us an email is contact us at thementalbreakdown.com and say, hey, this was my user ID on iTunes.
Right.
I wrote a review. Now send me my book. And
Or
I
else.
Will, or I'll, yeah, or else. And
No.
I will send you the book.
I think it's a great thing. We'd
Yeah.
love to hear from you and would love to send you the book. We want to share it.
Absolutely.
And again, let us know what you think.
Right. And pass it on to your friends if they
that's right.
listen to the podcast and like to write a review, or if they would like to just get a free copy of the book, have them go on and write a book, or write a
They don't have to write a book,
You don't have to write a
but
book. It just
can be short.
a little blurb. Yeah.
Right.
And we will get that out to them.
Right.
So all right.
And today's topic
Uh-huh.
with these overinvolved parents. If
Right.
we're wrong, if I feel very strongly about this. If you think we're wrong, let me know, because I think American parents are too involved with their children. Too many. American parents are too involved with their children. If I'm wrong, please let me know.
Yeah.
Okay?
You can message us. You can send it to the
I
same
won't
email
know.
address.
But I won't know how to respond, will I?
If they send it to the email address.
Oh,
we
if
will.
they send it to
Yeah.
the email address, yeah, because
Absolutely.
I'd love to have more thoughts about this. We're terribly concerned about children who are homeless and neglected and don't have sufficient parental support, and we're terribly concerned about at the other end where parents are too involved
Right.
for too long a time.
Yeah.
So we're concerned about both extremes. So
Yeah.
love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid. Thanks for sharing this episode of the Mental Breakdown and Psychreg podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will find all of our previous podcasts and much more. We would be honored if you would become a patron through patreon.com, where any donation you can manage will go to the development and creation of more content. Just visit patreon.com/thementalbreakdown for more information. Thanks again for listening. Have an awesome day, and we look forward to being back in your feed tomorrow morning.